My name is AMIR. I'm here to represent PEN Malaysia, which is a brand new NGO devoted to literary activities and defending freedom of expression. If you'd like to join, the president is here. She can explain more, Anli. And I'll have like a quiz in the middle, and the winner will get a free membership. So that's our contribution to it. I wanted to do something related to the 1990s. And this was not actually the first proposal. Actually, I'm not even sure if this is on. It is on. Oh, it is on. I screwed up. It is? Okay, can. It's working. Okay. Now it feels. So this wasn't even my first proposal. I might as well share it. Where is Rahel? Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So my first proposal was to do a video essay called Looking for Julia Raiz. But she didn't approve that. I don't know why. Because I thought Julia Raiz personified certain things about the early 90s. And, you know, it's literally looking for her, like, where is she now? That kind of thing. So I decided to switch to this instead. And the topic of banned books is quite close to my heart because of the next slide. Let's see. I'm trying to figure out how this works as it goes along. Aha. I had switched it off. Yeah. So in 2022, I got this letter from KDN, and I will just read it out to you lah. Penerbitan bertajuk Cekik oleh Ridwan Saidi. By the way, Ridwan is right here. Dengan hormatnya, saya merujuk pada perkara tersebut di atas. Actually, the word tersebut is redundant. It should be just kepada perkara di atas. Dimaklumkan bahawa pihak kementerian telah mengkaji penerbitan tersebut dan didapati terdapat kandungan yang mungkin memudaratkan kemoralan. Berdasarkan Subsection 7.1 Printing and Publications Act 1984, Kementerian telah memutuskan penerbitan tidak diingini dan dikenakan, I assume you can read lah, that's why I'm not reading every single word clearly, dan dikenakan perintah larangan melalui Warta Kerajaan few numbers bertarikh 12 Oktober. Sehubungan itu, mana-mana orang yang mencetak, mengimport, menghasilkan semula, menerbit, menjual, mengeluar, mengeliling, which it's a bit odd, mengeluar, mengeliling, menawarkan untuk menjual, mengedar, atau ada dalam milikannya, bagi apa, I'm so excited to be using this red thing. Dalam milikannya, bagi apa-apa tujuan maksud seperti itu, apa-apa hasil penerbitan, larangan, melakukan satu kesalahan, I skipped ahead, and yalah, you can get fined to 20,000 ringgit or jailed 3 years or both. So either 20,000 ringgit fine or 3 years or both. So I thought the phrasing is very interesting because it says if you intend to sell, distribute and all that, or you have it in your possession with the intention to do any of that. So I take it to mean that actually to own it is not an offense, but to own it with the intention of then selling it, distributing it, and all that's an offense. So someone explained it to me by saying that if they find one open copy in your house, you can say it's your personal thing, but once you have two, then it can be said that, the other one you're planning to give someone else, or you're planning to sell it. So they're not. But someone should test this out legally. And then I like the last paragraph because it's so gentle. Kementerian ini juga memohon jasa baik pihak tuan supaya menarik balik pengedaran penerbitan tersebut daripada pasaran di seluruh negara. Kerjasama daripada pihak tuan amatlah dihargai dan diucapkan ribuan terima kasih. So when you read it also, hati kau jadi sejuk macam tu lah. Because it's like they're persuading you, they're telling you in a nice tone of voice, don't sell anymore lah, just stop lah. Okay lah, thank you. So what's interesting and what people sometimes kind of misunderstand when they say a book is banned, there's actually no reason given. It just says, mungkin memudaratkan kemoralan, might lead to moral degradation. And that's all. This is the whole letter I got. There is nothing to say, this paragraph says this, and this is wrong because of this, and all that. There's no even a single quote. So it's a very general thing. So I think that's the first thing I want to set across, that if a book is banned, I'm sure there are reasons, but you're not told. You're not told what it is. So if you want to go, then maybe you have to inquire further and all that, which we didn't do for this case. So we will be looking at a lot of books later. Some are banned and some are not and all that. But usually even the ones that are banned, it will be just be given under a category, like moral. It won't say very specific. So that's the thing lah. So we will start. This talk is about the 1990s, but I want to start earlier by looking at the first sort of famous case of a banned book in Malaya, and it's this one from 1937. Those of you whose Jawi is good enough should be able to read this. This is a novel called Putra Gunung Tahan, which was published in 1937. The writer was Ishak Haji Muhammad, more popularly known as Pak Sako. And it was banned because it is a very anti-colonial kind of a tale. It's told like a kind of a fairy tale. It's about, I happen to have it here. So, but not this version lah. I think this version, if you try and look for it, it will be quite expensive because it's Jawi. So, Putra Gunung is quite a slim book, and it's told like a kind of a fairy tale about two white men. So these are the two white men here, William and Robert, I think, who they see that there is this Gunung Tahan, and they want to take over the top, the peak, to turn it into a resort for white people. And by doing this, if they succeed, they will get £5,000. And the reason why there's a picture of a white couple here, of all things, is because of something that happens later on in the book. How many people have read Putra Gunung Tahan? One person. So it's hard to bullshit. Two. Okay lah, I can't bullshit so much. So it's a very fun tale because it's like an adventure. It's like these two white guys going, and then one gets kidnapped by orang asli, and the other, so they are separated. So we follow both of them in kind of alternate chapters. And the guy who kidnaps the orang asli, who's kidnapped by the orang asli, he tries to marry one of them because they put a spell on him that he falls in love with this girl. But he tries to fulfill certain vows to get the girl. And then he fails. So the final vow he tried to, the task he tried to do was to climb a coconut tree. And he didn't do it properly, and he fell down and he died. And the paragraph ends with, dia kemudian jatuh dan mati. And then the next sentence is, kasihan. So, and the next guy lasted longer. He managed to meet the kind of the royal head of the mountain, Putra Gunung Tahan, but a bit confusingly, his title is Ratu, Ratu Bongsu. So at first when I read it, I thought it was a woman, but actually when you progress, it's obvious Ratu is not a woman. So I know someone else who had that same confusion because I talked about this novel yesterday to another person, and he said, itu yang ada lesbian tu ke? So I said, no, it's not lesbian. Ratu is a man. I said, okay, so it's like, it's only clarified some things. So, and he goes to this, the one who survives, William, goes to see the Putra Gunung Tahan, who gives him a magic telescope, which is a bamboo. So he looks into the bamboo, and he can see his wife back in England having an affair with this young guy. So that's his magical thing. And then there's another magical thing later with a mirror, I think. And then, so a lot of the book is a dialogue between the prince of Gunung Tahan and this white man. This white man is saying, all the other states in Peninsular Malaya all have British residents, except Pahang. It's a very Pahang-centric book. Look at how progressive everybody else is in all these states. Why don't you want to be them? But this prince is very smart. He says, no, but they are not progressive. They have to follow whatever you white people say. The sultans are not really powerful. And one of the things he shows is that, so the white man shows with this teropong, like, look at how maju everything is. And then the prince said, show me a church in Selangor. And so he showed a church in Selangor and says, Oh, ada orang Melayu kat situ. Ya, ada orang Melayu kat situ. So it's like a sign that, it's not good to have white people there. So in the end, plane comes and bombs the whole place, but because he sends a note to London on an eagle. So the eagle delivers his letter. So it came to destroy, but the prince survives, but the white man dies, because they were smart enough to put the white man where the bombs would lie. And it ends with the white woman, his widow, coming out of the plane. And the first thing she says when she looks around her is this Hyde Park? Macam tu lah. So it's kind of an odd thing for her to say, but yeah. So it ends up with them getting married. So he marries the white man's widow. So the point of the story is that, white people, they're greedy, they're not very bright, and they will take away your rights. They're here just to steal from you and all that. So based on that, it was banned. So for a long time, it was just known as a very celebrated novel, anti-colonial, that was banned because of that. And another one, after World War II, this is actually not a novel, it is a manifesto. It's a manifesto for a political party. The political party, Angkatan Pemuda Insaf, and the person who wrote it is Ahmad Bustamam. And this manifesto called for, merdeka through any means. So it was like this sentence. Oh, I'm so glad I have this thing. Pendeknya, API mau berjuang untuk mencapai kemerdekaan bangsa dan tanah air dengan segala jalan yang terbuka, dengan lembut jika boleh, dengan keras jika terpaksa. So this was the whole thing as a whole. This thing was considered seditious. So Bustamam was arrested. But in his memoir, this is actually one of the best memoirs ever written by a Malayan. He recounts something that happened to him before he was arrested, because he said the political manifesto was out, it was distributed in the Congress, it was sold to the members, and he said it was sold very well. And this is the Congress in 46, like after war, and people are the left-wing nationalist kind of movement was starting to pick up steam. And and he said after that, he was having a drink at Kampung Baru. And suddenly this white man came and sat with him. And this white man introduced himself as Birch. He said he's a descendant of the JWW Birch. And he said Birch was from the police force in KL. And Birch offered him, kept asking him questions about API, like, how many members you have? Are there enough to march? Or boleh berkawat tak? So he says, and Bustamam said, yeah, every branch we have enough members to berkawat. So it's giving the impression that it's such a big nationwide thing. And Birch offered him, if I give you $750 and a car and a house, would you make API cooperate with the government? So you become like a wing of the government. And Bustaman's reply was, if you see me in Java Street with my hand like this, he does like a begging bowl, and Java Street later became Jalan Mountbatten. If you see me in Java Street with a begging bowl, that is a sign I will accept your offer. So he said Birch was kind of humiliated by that reply. And he said in his memoir that, so Birch had something personal against him, which is why he was charged for this pamphlet. They barged into a bus in Pahang and looked around the bus and said, oh, who is Bustamam? And they dragged him out and took him to KL. So he was jailed, not jailed, he was held pending charge. And the bail was 1,000 ringgit. And nobody had cash, 1,000 ringgit. So one of the API members' the father of one of them, he said, I will go to the police station, I will bring all my land deeds, all my grand tanah. And he said, just in case my grand tanah doesn't do it, I'm bringing a parang as well. So I thought, that was interesting. So yeah, but later on, he was charged and they chose to pay the fine instead of going to jail. because, and some people sort of criticize Bustamante for that, saying that, oh, that means you're not brave enough to go to jail. And he replied, during Japanese occupation, I was already in jail. Now I'm needed to, for the nationalist movement. And of course, he did. So that's the second famous. So these two, Putra Gunung Tahan and Testament Politik Api, they're very ideologically driven. It's like something interesting to talk about in the context of nation building and all that. Most of the other banned books you will see after this are not. So in the 1950s, these are the number of books banned per year. So if you notice something interesting, 1951 was huge. It's actually the single year with the most banned books, 1951. And I looked at all the titles. Almost all of them were Chinese, and almost all of them were communist. When they have words like revolution, Chairman Mao, of course, and then Marx, Lenin, the glorious future and things like that. So workers unite, So because we're only given the titles, right? So based on this, yeah, almost all of them were Chinese language propaganda things, because of course that's the height of the emergency, right? It's just 3 years after the emergency. That was a great pressing concern for the colonial government. And after a while, it went down and went down. And I would like to think, after Merdeka, this is Malaya, it's very Malaya-centric, sorry. After Merdeka, the government was so confident, no books were banned for 2 years. So I thought, there's such a nice, glorious future. It's like, whenever a new government comes in, they're very good for about 2 years. And then the trouble starts. So the next will be by decade. Books banned by decade. So, yes, now we saw the 1950s. 60s, relatively low, 71, went up a bit. 80s went down, actually. And then we have this huge anomaly in the middle, which is the decade we are concentrating on. Suddenly, there was a big thing. Then it went down, and the current decade also, it'll be even lower than this. I've seen the first 5 years. It's very low. So I'm quite interested in why, out of all the decades, why was 1990s the biggest nailer? I hope these calculations are correct. I've did it with Excel spreadsheet and all that, because these were not provided in that form, so copy-pasted one by one. So next. Next. Yeah. And they will tell you, whenever they ban, they will tell you title, language, writer, if got, not all have writers. Publisher, if got, not all have publishers. Printer, if got, not all have printer. And the tarikh diwartakan. And you can also, there's another separate list where they give you the reason, and the reasons are into very broad categories, but nothing so specific of that. So as you can see, Malay, Chinese, almost the same, almost a tie. English, mainly imported books. Actually, even Chinese, mainly imported books, like that. Tamil, very few. I saw it, it's like one book about atheism, one book about communism, so it's like quite random. But yeah, the two biggest ones are Malay and Chinese. Unfortunately, in the government website, the Chinese ones are just put as the Malay titles. It's not the literal ones. So I showed it to someone who reads Chinese and who knows about publications and all that. And when I showed these titles, he said, oh yeah, those are those things that they sell in, like mama shops, this like soft porn things that are very, very thin, very colorful cover, but not many pages. So it's that kind of thing. It's nothing so serious. It's nothing like Putra Gunung Tahan. It's nothing so of great ideological merit. It's just this hamsap kind of publications. And what's interesting is that some are in lain. So I'm very curious about lain. So I clicked to see what is lain. So these are in not any of the main languages. The first one has such a long list for writer. The first one is something called Louis, and then don't know what. Maybe it's French, I don't know. So it's like, but the rest all sound like porn, 5 doors, big X, sounds like porn. And then this one, something religious. but then the name of the writer is so long because it's written by this Kiai in Javanese and then translated into Malay by someone else and then improved by someone else. So maybe it was banned because it's so long to explain who the writer is. So we also don't know why. We're just told it's a religious reason. So these are 5 out of 6. Guess what the 6th is? The 6th is this. Yeah. So if you have a bag with this sort of design, a marijuana leaf with writing, it says needs writing, needs writing. So maybe a leaf by itself is okay. So if it's surrounded by writing, you can be caught, and this is under this offense lah. Because this was diwartakan, it was gazetted as a banned material in 1990. So for example, this is the whole sentence. Mana-mana logo dalam reka bentuk daun ganja yang dikelilingi dengan perkataan-perkataan. As someone who proofreads, I don't approve of this dengan. Because actually dikelilingi perkataan-perkataan is enough. Kan Ridwan? Betul kan? So entah kenapa dia orang government dia suka membazir perkataan. So and under the broad category of counterculture. Counterculture just hippies lah, gays lah. I don't know, it's quite broad and it just means whatever they want it to mean. So for example, this sentence, if it's like this, it's fine. But if it's like this, then it's banned lah, kan? Mana-mana logo dalam pembentukan ganja dikelilingi dengan perkataan-perkataan. So this can be a banned product if you print it out and take it out. Because on the screen tak lah, because it's not a publication. But once it's published, this is a banned thing already lah. So since 1984, this is what, very Orwellian, of course. This is the law that governs what gets banned and why. So if you notice, it says any article, caricature, photograph, report, notes, writing, sound, music, statement, or any other thing. So look at this any other thing. Some of the things that have fallen under this would include the swatch, the LGBT swatch thing. It was under the same act, because a watch is a thing, what? So it's any other thing, all right? And this also is very broad. So this basically says everything. So when it says music, yes, if an album is banned, it's under this as well. So later I will show you some albums banned in the 1990s. Some of you may even have it. You can delete them right now from your Spotify. So this is also very broad, prejudicial to public order, morality, security, the relationship with any foreign country. Because there was a time there were a lot of publications about like Southern Thai, macam tu. So I noticed like, it probably fell under this. It will affect relationship with Thailand. Or government, which is likely to alarm public opinion. Contrary to law, or is otherwise prejudicial, or is likely to be prejudicial to public interest or national interest. So it's very broad. It's just up to the minister to just say, yeah, just stamp and sign it. And so these are the rationales for the 1990s only. The biggest is sexuality. All those Hams Up publications, those 200 plus in Chinese one. I remember one of the titles was AMIR yang berdada besar dan bijak. Which I thought was interesting. Dada besar dia bijak atau AMIR yang bijak. So those kind of titles lah. When you look at it, okay lah, you know exactly what it is. Religion, usually things related to Islam, or if it's a Christian thing in Malay, so it comes under that, under religion. Counterculture, that vague thing, is next lah. The rest. So actually what I want to come across to say is actual explicit political things is very rare. This was the decade, 1990s. You had a lot of these instant publications, right? Mahazalim, very few of them were actually banned. Very few. Only like, I think 5 were like blatantly political kind of things. So most of it was kind of allowed. And not just books. We also had a lot of magazines that, they didn't follow the KDN kind of rule. You can just print it like that. So those were never caught or banned under this this act. So it was quite free in that sense, but yeah, they had a lot of time to confiscate a lot of sex-related and religion-related matters. So I looked through all the Chinese titles. I did a word cloud. So you can kind of tell from, I think Ganjil it seemed to be a kind of a series. It's like Dunia Ganjil, so I think it's just some kinky kind of thing. Maybe in Chinese it makes more sense. So these are the words that appear a lot. So besar came with Amy Yip, right? So there was Amy Yip besar. It came from the same title. So by looking at it, gigolo, godaan, you can tell it's almost entirely sex-based, the Chinese titles. Next, the Malay titles, almost entirely religious. Islam, Mukmin, Alkitab. Alkitab is Bible again. Allah, Jesus, Arqam, we'll see. Ustaz, so it's almost all that. But got lah some lucah. So I'm trying to look where is the lucah one. Itulah pelacu. Maybe even sarang might be something. Yeah, so rumah tangga, I think that's pretty much. So, Mahathir is very small. That means only like a few words actually referred specifically to politicians. Whereas when you remember that time, there were a lot of this kind of rhetoric. English titles are mainly imported books. So a lot of them was like, Illustrated Guide to Sex. So a lot of this. Kama Sutra, various versions of Kama Sutra. There's one on, dirty jokes, things like that. So I think the number one thing is still sexual, and then comes other things lah. And a lot of books related to religion, which is almost entirely Islam lah. So those were the name. So here's a fun activity for you. I don't know, fun or not. Tell me why you think this was banned. A complete guide to Malaysian immigration procedures on application for expatriate post-employment pass visit pass. That's how it's written. I'm just copying it. Temporary employment, visit pass, professional, student pass, dependent pass, and it ends with V. I don't know if V was like a typo for close paragraph or no, it's not. V. Maybe it's like part 5, or maybe it's not even supposed to be there. So the reason given, broad reason, is politics, which of course can mean anything. This is the writer, publisher, printer, language, the year of banning. So can anybody come up with a creative? This is your chance to win a membership to Ban Malaysia, by the way. I have no idea why. Because I'm trying to figure out what in this very dry sounding thing could have possibly been so offensive politically that it was banned. So if you Google it, you won't find it. So nobody, no one has a guess. Come on, fun. Oh, okay. Oh no, 2 times in a row. Okay, so next. In the 1990s, there were 2 very notorious books in the second half of the decade. These surprisingly were not banned. Surprisingly, because I think a lot of people had knowledge of these books, and they were seen as sort of very negative kind of books, but nothing happened. One was this one, 50 Dalil Mengapa Anwar Tidak Boleh Jadi PM. It was circulated in the UMNO General Assembly of that year. And it's widely credited for being a book that kind of had this effect of people talking about the bad side of Anwar, I suppose. And it was credited with leading to his downfall. Not directly, but it was part of this momentum, of course, part of this conspiracy. So I remember reading that book back then, and I remember these 3 things in particular. So I wanted to just highlight. So out of 50 dalil, a lot are very obvious, like main rasuah, main buntut, a lot of very obvious. Okay, that's bad. And then suddenly, suka bergaduh. Nama Anwar sendiri mentafsirkan Anwar suka bergaduh atau berperang. Anwar bererti suatu perang dalam bahasa Inggeris. Kerana itu hidupnya suka pada krisis, bergaduh, pertelingkahan dan berperang. So imagine, this is one of the 50. Second one, dahi pesek. Kalau kita amati dahi Anwar ternyata pesek. Menurut ahli feng shui, UMNO percaya feng shui pula kan? Menurut ahli feng shui, orang berdahi pesek tidak akan menjadi pemimpin agung atau pemimpin nombor satu. So like, what is this nonsense, right? And remember this one in particular, makan mencangkung, makan bersepit. Sepit ni lah, chopsticks lah kan. So tata tertib Melayu adalah tata tertib kehidupan Islam. Perjuangan Islam lah menjadi asas perjuangan UMNO sewaktu dalam ABIM. Tapi bila jadi menteri, adab kesopanan yang diamalkan selama ini terus hilang. Anwar dirakamkan makan mencangkung di khalayak ramai dan makan bersepit di depan Perdana Menteri. So imagine this like, why are these in here? So I remember reading it way back then and thinking that rendahnya IQ orang UMNO ni, like you get this book in your persidangan. It was given to everybody for free. And you actually take it seriously, and it has things like this, right? So yeah, so it was never banned. But later when Anwar got out of jail, he sued the writer, Khalid Jafri, if you remember. And Anwar won. He won millions, right? But then the writer died. So I don't know. I think nobody ended up paying him good. But as well as moral victory, it was proven that the whole book as a whole is libelous. And this is another book. Yeah, so I think a lot of people have the kind of impression that this book is banned, but it never was. At one point, I remember reading that it sold 200,000 copies, legitimate. It was sold in every single past ceramah. So much so that it became pirated. So the actual number of sales, we don't know. So a lot of people bought it as a kind of a symbolic token kind of thing. I dare say not many people finished reading it. It's not the most pleasant book to read until the end. But yeah, so there was a thing where it was for the most notorious book of its year, but it was never banned. And the government has said, no, not banned, no need. So I think it's because someone like Shannon Ahmad had so much stature, he has such moral authority, that to ban him would just feed the idea that this government is very repressive. Like, sasar negara pun kena ban, that kind of thing. So the government didn't take the bait lah, in that sense. So that was it. I have this as well. I can show it to you because it's not banned, right? So So I think many of you maybe have it, or maybe in your house you have it. But how many have a personally autographed copy? I mean, come on, Lache. Flex. Yeah. So this book was so notorious, no idiot in the mainstream media would defend it. Nobody was dumb enough in the mainstream media to defend it. It would be suicidal if you were in the mainstream media to defend it. And guess what? So this is my article. Called In Defense of Shahrir Ahmad. Yes, ignore how Jambu I looked back then. So is it clear enough? With all the strife and misery currently tearing the world asunder. I used to use words like asunder. It's a pleasant surprise to find a novel, and a Malaysian one at that, hitting the front pages of our newspapers for several days running. For this reason alone, we should be grateful to Shannon Ahmad. The veteran writer's 30th novel cannot be found in any mainstream bookshop, but it's being heatedly discussed in several kedai kopi across the land. 15,000 copies have been sold in less than a month, propelled no doubt by the media, do you pronounce it furore or furor? Yeah. To keep up with the unprecedented demand, counterfeit copies might soon be popping up at pasar malam stalls, thus putting Shannon in the celebrity range of, say, Siti Nurhaliza or Yusuf Aslam, whose works have been in the past been similarly pirated. Shows you how slowly Malaysia evolves, that figures mentioned 25 years ago, they're still active now. So who says literature isn't relevant anymore? This kind of all-out recognition is certainly long overdue for Shannon. A constant kissing cousin to controversy, he's currently one of the very few interesting prose writers in Malaysia. Oh my God, I'm quoting Edin Khoo here. Never mind, I won't quote that again. So, his third book, set firmly in the third phrase, his sort of scandalous phrase, is simply and traumatically titled Shit. And I think NST could print it. Some papers didn't print it. They put S and then 3 asterisks. Some people have been so turned off by the title that they refuse to read the book altogether. Among them is another national laureate, Abdullah Hussein, who piously said, "I feel it would be a sin to read that novel." So, of course, Abdullah Hussein was the writer of Kuala Lumpur Kita Punya, the subject of my previous talk, some of you who were here. So I found this quote quite amusing lah. It's like, saya akan rasa berdosa kalau saya baca buku ni. So there was a big media thing because he's sastra negara, and one of the benefits of sastra negara is you get free first-class medical care, which is important because people who become sastra negara are appointed at the age where you already have gout, and so first-class medical is very important to them. So I remember the sort of vox pop, TV3 and all that, asking random people in the street, "Patutkah gelaran sastra negara ditarik balik?" And people go, "Huh? What?" That kind of thing. So like that lah. So this article came out April 1999. Needless to say, a few weeks later, I was not allowed to write for the papers anymore. But enough about me. So in the 1990s, these are kind of the well-known books that were banned. To be honest, most of the books banned, if you look at the titles, you have no idea what they are, because it's like very vague and all that kind of thing. But these were the titles I recognized because of the writers were well-known and the titles were kind of well-known. So there are 2 Harold Robbins books here. Harold Robbins has published many books, but for some reason only 3 are banned in Malaysia. And there's another one banned in a different decade. I deliberately put V.S. Naipaul in between because it's the sort of thing he would have hated. You put V.S. Naipaul sandwiched between Harold Robbins. And also this, Among the Believers, ironic because there's a chapter in Malaysia where he interviewed Anwar Ibrahim. But that book was written in the 70s, I think. Anwar was still in ABIM. And that's banned. Harold Robbins, obviously, because of sex. This one, they would have said something he said about religious authorities, maybe here. The Marquis de Sade, this book has been around forever, but in the 90s it was banned. Aeneas Nin. A Stanley comic, Epic Illustrated, Volume 1. So for some reason, that's the only Marvel book to be banned in Malaysia in the 90s. The first Karen Armstrong book to be banned. She wrote a biography, Muhammad. So also ironic because Karen Armstrong is someone who comes to Malaysia often and gives talks and all that. But many of her books are officially banned. Candy, also not a new book, but they banned it in the 90s. The Prophet, interesting because somebody told me it's because somebody in KDN thought this is a picture of Nabi Muhammad. Whereas, of course, if you've read Khalil Gibran's The Prophet, it's got nothing to do with that. So someone said it's that. It's just a reason as dumb as that. They thought because he had a picture and Prophet, it will confuse Muslims. So the book was banned. This one, it was a cash-in book for the TV series Twin Peaks. If you remember Twin Peaks, this girl, she died. So the kononnya, they found her secret diary. Sexually explicit because she was a victim of sexual abuse. So these are, among the few titles that are kind of known. So even if I put the other titles, you wouldn't know. So like I said, it's not only for books, it's for non-books items. So the next are a few albums, music albums, that were banned in the 90s. So, surprisingly, Iwan Fals, juara lagu-lagu Iwan Fals, Swami with his band Swami. And which is weird. I didn't know, there was a band Iwan Fals album. And this is the album that it was actually controversial in Indonesia because there are songs that are seen to be critical of Suharto. This is in the early 90s. Suharto still in power. So there's one song, it's called Bento, where it's about the persona is as if Bento supposedly stands for Benteng Suharto. And the persona of someone who is rich and very cruel and exploitative, and he doesn't care because he is who he is. So it was controversial in Indonesia, but I don't know why it ended up being banned in Malaysia. Then there's a group called Babes in Toyland. I'm not so familiar. Madonna Erotica, surprisingly, because I thought I saw it in record stores, but it's in the Senarai Diwartakan. Motley Crue's self-titled album, WASP, something called Sabotage. I think these three probably there was a kind of panic to do with what people call black metal and things like that, right? So maybe it's one of those things where, if you play it backwards, somebody is praising Satan or, or something like that. So quite random this list of but it's kind of quaint now, because now how do you actually ban? So not actually many albums were banned. Not many albums were banned. What was more common in the 90s and especially the 80s is the kind of ban they would constitute is, you cannot play it on radio. So not playing something on radio is as good as banning it. But of course now all that is not relevant anymore. Okay, we'll we will go through some more trivia. Do you want to hazard a guess? I will give you 5 names. There are 5 names here. It's countdown lah. So do you want to guess even one of them? Shannon Ahmad is not one of them, obviously. He's never, yeah. No. Surprisingly, no. Yes. That's a good guess, though. Yeah. Ada? But that's not a person. Arqam. But that's not a person. You may be right. Yes. You saw the slides. Yes, yeah. True. That is one of the answers. So we'll count down number 5 to 1. At number 6, with 6 band titles, it's obviously a pseudonym, I think. Iza Shahrizad. We don't know anything about her, macam female pseudonym kot. Or maybe it's a man writing as a woman. No record of how this person looks like. So the titles are Senja di Lombong Sepi, Burung-burung di Kabus Senja. This is also, I'm very upset by this because di Kabus should be separated. Yeah? So it should be banned for this. For bad spelling. Godaan Iblis, Ganas, Korban Cinta Palsu. And this one gives you a hint as to the genre we're in. It's Dilemma si Mona Gersang. I'm a bit concerned about this because Iza Shahrizad was not the writer of the original Mona Gersang. But he or she was opportunistic enough to come up with a book called Mona Gersang. So this is a bit like if you know your James Bond, this is a bit like Never Say Never Again. It's like an unofficial entry in the Mona Gersang canon because it's not written by the main Mona Gersang writer. So that was it. So yeah, I think you can guess. I mean, all porn, obviously. So 6 titles. Number 4, with 7 titles. This is the writer I was referring to earlier. This is the creator of the Mona Gersang universe. Okay? So it started with Mona Gersang, and then it became Legenda si Mona Gersang. And of course, the trilogy ends with Kembalinya Mona Gersang. So this is like Back to the Future. Kan? Or it's like scenario lagi scenario. So yeah, so I mean obviously pseudonym, never seen. So aside from the 3 Mona Gersang books which made him rich, but I don't know how rich, because these things, those of us who have read it, and I'm sure nobody will admit to it, but some of you have, were mostly distributed in pirated form. It's like photocopy, that kind of thing. So I think not many people actually, went to a shop and bought it. It's the sort of thing boys passed around in residential schools. So I've heard, yeah. So aside from the Mona Gersang ones, you had others in the similar genre Terbang bebas hingga tak berkaki. Terbang bebas hingga tak berkaki. Kuala Lumpur makin panas. This sounds like a duology because there's Kuala Lumpur makin panas and Kuala Lumpur makin panas Dilemma Seorang Janda. So I think this was the sequel, right? Or the porn parody, I don't know. So it's like, and Capanya. So this sounds like a motivational book. But since we know what the rest of his books were, I don't think it's meant to be a motivational book. Tercapainya sebuah impian. So when I was Googling him, there is a school in Kelantan with the same name. Because Tengku Mahmud Mahyudin was a prince during the Japanese occupation. So this was him, but obviously it's not him. So I feel embarrassed on the head on behalf of the students who are Googling their school. to see what accomplishments they've done, and then you come across all this. Yeah, so maybe it was written by a former student, for all you know, right? Maybe that's the backstory of that pseudonym. So it's a mystery, and of course, after this decade, you don't hear from this kind of writers anymore because people migrate to internet, right? Number 3. Qasim Ahmad, well-known literary person, translator, did a lot of work with Malay classics like Hikayat Hang Tuah, Sejarah Melayu, socialist leader at that time. So, a very accomplished kind of guy. He's managed to have 8 books banned. The most famous is this one, Hadis Satu Penilaian Semula. Not in the 90s, it was in the 80s. This book was so notorious, I think it sort of colored people's perception of him for the rest of his life, right? Which is a damn shame because he actually accomplished so much in his life. A real intellectual, a real activist, that kind of thing. But later on, in his later decades, if you mention his name to most younger Malays, especially, they would say, "Oh, dia yang anti-hadis." It's just that thing alone it became the stamp that it never left him for the rest of his life. So I'm quite sad at that thought, whereas he did so much. So I think the rest were banned later, partly because his reputation was so notorious and so negative. So anything he came up with was just automatically banned, right? So he tried to answer the Hadis book. So Hadis Satu Penilaian Semula was his take on Hadith by saying that if you compare a Quranic verse and the Hadith, and the Hadith contradicts it, then you can discard the Hadith. And so he's saying that no matter what, you have to find the source in the Quran first. So that was considered so controversial that he was called murtad and got death threats and things like that. So even his memoir, which he wrote for ZI, Mencari Jalan Pulang daripada Sosialisme kepada Islam, also was banned years later. So imagine, dah pulang ke Islam pun masih kena ban. Kan? So I'm like, can't get a break. And yeah, this is also another memoir, Jalan Irus also. So yeah, 18. But his body of work is very interesting. He's worth discussing. I hope more people will do something with his very big contributions to Malaysian writing and Malaysian thought. So he's number 3. Number 2, if you're Kelantanese, maybe you will know. There's a famous imam about 100 years ago called Tok Kenali. So this guy, Muhammad Yusof Cik Wo, he's a grandson, and he writes this kind of, they call it macam makrifat, like a spiritual, but quite Sufi kind of things, where it says that God and there's no line between man and God, that kind of thing, where it's considered very controversial because it's like, oh, how can you mean? What do you mean? Men can be not to say elevated, but he's saying that God is sort of everywhere. So it's seen as very pantheistic, this kind of worldview, and so he's had a lot of books banned, 12, all very thin, all like pamphlets, and it's not like the keywords of things like marifat, ilmu kenal diri, and that kind of thing. So he had a lot of things banned for that. But you search online, there are people who have uploaded videos of his lectures, that kind of thing. So number 12. So, yeah, a bit of a spoiler. So the next is a huge gap ahead. Huge gap ahead. From number 12 to the number 1 writer. This is the number 1. The reason I put 43 in bracket, question mark, is his name was spelled differently in different ways in the government website. Most of it is Ustaz Ashari Muhammad. And then there's one Ustaz Ashari Muhammad dan Ustazah Khatijah Am, his wife. They call her Umujah, kan? And then suddenly he's listed as Abuya Sheikh Imam Ashari Muhammad, but it's the same person. And then he became Ashari Muhammad also. And then suddenly got Sheikh Imam Ashari. And then you got Ustaz Haji, where Haji is HZ, and Haji is full. So if you're not careful, you will read all this, and you will think it's like different persons, but it's the same person. So he was, of course, the founder of the Arqam movement. And except for a few, there's one about tsunami. Do you see a tsunami? Yeah. So tsunami was obviously during after the Aceh tsunami. But most of this were all banned in the 90s. So I think this is already one reason. Why 1990s so many books banned? Because of not only him, but other people associated with him publish a lot of publications to do with Arqam. And that constitutes a big chunk of the banned list. So I think, the short answer is what was so special about the 1990s? Arqam started publishing. Yeah. One of them was in 89. The rest all were 90s. And then I think the tsunami one was there. So that was the Nila. So having seen what is considered taboo in Malaysia, like obviously Arqam is one, and then seks will be another. Communism, not so much in this decade. There are very few. But if you look at all the previous decades, communism was always a big reason why something is banned. So anything to do with Chairman Mao, Stalin, Lenin, all those things are banned. So, but in the 90s, that had dropped quite a bit. But for some reason, 90s, you also had a lot of Chinese soft porn. So they sort of took up the list. So I thought of what would it look like to create a composite of what is the most bannable book in Malaysia, bearing in mind we have all these elements. So I'm sorry, this is a bad thing to say in an art gallery, but I resorted to ChatGPT. So I fed them certain info about these banned titles and says create a book title, a book cover that is most likely to be banned. And I'm not so happy with the result, but this is what I came up with. Yeah. So you have a spiritual leader, vaguely styled after Abuya. You know why? Because Abuya seorang yang teliti. And you have a sexy Chinese woman who is reading communist books. And I don't know why ChatGPT is so literal. They wrote down communist propaganda like that. And it's a vague, I think it's dua kalimah syahadah, but it's very vague like that. So this might be the most banned book in Malaysia. And the title, for fun, it's a trending Indonesian film now. Ipar adalah maut. So if somebody wants to do a book that will most likely get banned, I guess it will look a bit like this. But missing one crucial ingredient, because this guy doesn't really look like Abuya Ashari Muhammad at all. So his face needs to be covered, but needs to be covered in a way that makes it look more offensive. So here we go like this. So this is it, this is the most banned book in Malaysia. Yeah. So yeah, that's it for the talk. Thank you very much. I look forward to questions. Yes. We were given 2 hours, but I told them, 2 hours is way too long. But I'll just talk for 1 hour, and then if people have questions, they are welcome to. Yes, I'm not an expert. I'm not a legal expert, but for what I know, I will try to answer lah. Yeah. You mentioned who mentioned Faizal Tarani? You did, because Faizal Tarani is an interesting case, because usually when people get their books banned, nobody bothers to fight. Like even for our case, because I've had 2 books banned. In both cases, I asked the writer, hey, you want to challenge this? And both writers said, no need lah. And one for a very practical reason. Cekik was published in 2011, and the ban came in 2022. So by the time the ban came, we had no copies left. So what does that mean, it's banned? And in both cases, the other book was called Aku by Shaz Johar. In both cases, I found out about the bans in the same way. A journalist I know would call me and says, Encik Amir, apa komen Encik Amir tentang buku yang diharamkan tu? And I would answer, buku mana? And because they get the news from the ministry first, the publisher is not informed first. You're not given a chance to like, oh, can you defend yourself, whatever. It's just, so in both cases, I found out from the news. And in both cases, I said, actually, buku tu dah habis. We don't have any more. So, boleh lah, ban lah. Ban pun ban lah. Like that. So, yeah. So, some people ask, why did it take them 11 years to ban Cekit? The only plausible answer is they are slow readers. Right? So, the other book was less time, but I think about 5 years or so. It took them 5 years to ban it. So I think most publishers don't bother because it's like, yeah, so what, ban. But Faizal Terani was an interesting case because at one point he had many books banned and he took them to court. He took the government to court and went right up to federal court, I think. And the good thing is he won. So the government said that, the court said that, these bans should not remain. There's no reason for them. So I think if more people tried that, you might get something because like I said, like in the first letter, memudaratkan kemoralan. That's the only reason you're given. But if you challenge it, maybe something will happen. Also, same thing happened to Sisters in Islam also, right? They challenged a book ban. And then the Irshad Manji case. So if more people did that, possibly you can, because it does seem to be applied in a very arbitrary way. But, there's that enormous cost involved. Because even if lawyers say pro bono, it's never fully pro bono. And it's just the time, you need to be ready to go to court at short notice. So that's why I think most people think that, okay, fine, you don't. So I think that's the reason why it's not a bigger news than what it should be. But also, like I was saying, that now the book banning has gone down, very few. So in that year that they banned Cekit, I think there were only like 10 books. So like, oh, we were one of them, that kind of thing. So yeah. So yeah, that was interesting that more tried that. Yes.
Has anyone actually been jailed for? Has anyone actually been jailed or fined for owning banned books?
I'm not sure. Has anyone? I don't think so. But for example, if they catch a lot of Arqam people, I think that would definitely be one of the charges. You are in possession of banned publications. I think that's definitely. But whether those were among the charges that actually stuck, maybe not. Maybe it's considered so minor that they go for higher offenses instead. But yeah, I can't think of anybody who's been jailed for owning, just for owning something like that. Yeah, that's a good question. Should look it up. Can anybody mention? I can't think of, because usually if you're jailed, it'll be like, there are bigger things. Like terrorists, they are sometimes found with things that it's a banned thing. So, but of course, they're jailed for other reasons. Yeah.
Were any of the bans lifted from the listed?
The list I gave, none of the bans were lifted, as far as I know. But of course, there have been books in the past, like the Malay Dilemma, which was banned and then unbanned. Yeah, but I think out of the 90s, none. But even if lifted, maybe in such a quiet way that nobody noticed. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite banned book?
Oh. Well, I think there are a lot of books that have been banned in different circumstances, right? But in the Malaysian context, when it comes to local publications, I would say Putra Gunung Tahan is very interesting. It sort of stands the test of time as a book. Yeah, that was kind of it. Yeah.
Is there a banned book that you really want to read just based on the title?
Yeah, is that boring one, that expatriate thing? Because yeah. Well, a lot of the titles are just very salacious, right? So it's just like, maybe what you can create out of the titles might actually be better than what was in it. Yeah. So yeah, can't think of. Yeah. Oh no, Danny's going to ask something difficult.
Could I just wonder whether the spike of the 90s having the most banned books couldn't be because the ecosystem for publishing cheaply, the same way like VCDs just flooded the market in the 90s. Could that be a contributing factor? And the second question is, did you ever could find a list of banned songs? Because you mentioned that mostly it's banned from radio, right? So I wonder whether you found any list of banned songs. Because I remember No Coke by Dr. Alban was banned, even though it was an anti-drug song.
I think people did find like RTM banned songs, but it was just a sort of, it was kind of a stray random thing. It was like from 1974, this on it. But in their own website, there won't be a list of that. Because some of those bands are like, they're not announced publicly. Because I think people in the recording industry used to say that sometimes these radio stations, they play favorites. So they would sort of shadow ban somebody because they are promoting a different artist. So that's not banned by the government, but the radio station won't play it. So maybe Emzol would know more from the entertainment scene. So is that kind of ban as well? But yeah, what was the first? I think that the proliferation of a lot of printed material, definitely. But like I said, it's also very curious that very few actually political books were banned. You didn't have any of that Mahazalim, kind of things. Dete and all those publications were never banned. So it was still, because it's cheap, but people produce a lot of porn. People produce a lot of Chinese language porn. Yeah.
Do you remember those days, some magazines, they actually had like black markers?
Yeah.
So I want to know what's the difference in the laws that apply, like complete banning or selective censorship?
Yeah, I actually had a classmate whose father did that. So I wish I could call him again. I don't have his number now because in the job description it says publication censorer, which I thought was quite funny. Those were under orders of KDN also, but not to the level of ban, because normally magazines, because it's like a subscription thing, so they won't stop one whole issue. But they have been magazines where certain issues are suppressed. Like during the pre-internet days, like Asia Week got interview with some opposition figure, so that whole issue you cannot sell, that kind of thing. But the thing is normally for like, if like somebody is topless, and they will do that. So yeah, it's not banned, but it's considered, I don't know, like a.
They don't do that anymore.
I don't think so, or maybe they do. They still do that. They do. Yeah. And like, for example, they would come to Big Bad Wolf every time, and they would confiscate a lot of art books. If like nude photography, that kind of thing, they would just confiscate. So it's not actually banned. It's just a way to intimidate. Like, these guys in the vests come, and they would just say, oh, they'll take it for kajian, and they don't return. Yeah. Even though they're supposed to return. Yeah. So actually you don't actually need to go through the hassle of actually banning something. But if you just turn up and you make your presence known, and you specify you don't approve of certain things, that already has a deterrent effect on most booksellers. It's okay lah, we don't want to deal with this hassle, because you don't want them hovering around and the customers will feel, something is wrong. Yeah. So they've learned to, if it's a photography book, be careful about what you bring in. Or if it's a book on Renaissance painting, be careful, not too much nudity inside. Yeah.
But at least in this case, they would know what exactly, rather than the blanket ban.
Yeah, because it's thousands of issues. So somebody has to do all that.
Since we're talking about that, any mention about movies, because I'm in film production, I can tell you roughly the whole world is changing because of onlyfans.com. You see, you can't stop it really, it's around the world. So that kind of publication, how are you going to stop? See?
Yeah, but that's under a different thing lah. That's under the film
You're
censorship.
looking at the movies becoming like very prevalent. You see, like soft porn is everywhere. The two things that sell on internet is only what? Gambling and sex. Nothing else. Okay?
Yeah, that's a whole different thing lah. Yeah, but to be fair, here I am defending LPF. To be fair, having had things banned by LPF before, when they ban it, they give you a reason, and they will say what minute, what second, this minute to this minute, how many seconds. They will list it out. So like the most recent movie we sent to censorship board, there were 13 notes. And each note by second, it will say what is wrong and what should be done to fix it. One I'm very proud of, where it's an entire scene where the comment is, sindiran politik yang melampau. So I think nobody else has ever gotten that note. So I thought, okay, we managed to. But on the negative side, it means they understood it. So so I have to mute that particular part. But yeah, so they are detailed in that way. Whereas book bans are never like that. They never say what page, what paragraph and all that. So one of our friends, our dear friend, Muttalib Othman, he had a book banned, Anjing Gonggong. Kan. So he had a book ban. So he tried to challenge it. He asked KDN, why did you ban this book? Why? So he thought he could be like a freedom of speech crusader. And then the guy, the officer showed one page. And I think, I may be remembering wrongly, but it was a joke where, because it's basically a joke book. So one joke is, keputusan SPM kau tak penting. Yang penting siapa bapak kau. And it's a picture of Mukris Mahathir in a diaper. So, wearing just a diaper. So, the officer said, because of that. And then Muttalib looked at it and says, I don't want to go to court for this. So it's like, okay lah, ban lah. Because if it had been something ideological, kind of it's like, oh, you can fight. But, he didn't feel strongly enough about it to go to court and defend this thing. Yes.
So one is a comment and maybe a bit of a plug about Malaysia in relation to the question of have there been any imprisoned writers, right? Because we are members of Pen Malaysia. Because one of the things that it has is separate committees. One is committee for imprisoned writers. One is for writers, indigenous languages and women writers. And the reason why we don't have an imprisoned writers committee because so far as we know, there hasn't been a Malaysian writer who has been in prison. And I think that in a way that's kind of if and when maybe that happens, then people I think would take bans and so on more seriously, or joining a kind of an organization that stands up for both celebrating literature and defending freedom of expression. But until that happens, meanwhile people get detained, right, for comments that they make in blogs and so forth overnight, but not actually in prison so far as we know so far. I want to ask you, Amir, as a publisher and a filmmaker, some people have said that the reason why censorship and laws against censorship is a good thing because it requires you to be more creative and resort to and use metaphors and allegories and so on. In your everyday business, both as a writer but also as a businessman publisher, how serious do you take avoiding being detained? How clever? It's been described as a dance. How serious and how far are you willing to go sometimes?
I'm willing to go to jail for any of my books. Some more than others. I think we all, as Malaysians, we have a kind of a censoring thing in our head. We have our own internal special branch. And of course, everybody's tolerance level is different. But we do have certain things that we think, okay, that shouldn't be in, because maybe not so much that, I don't think the immediate concern is that you be banned. It's not that. But the immediate concern is readers will be put off, because it's kind of, it's so hams up, or it's sort of gross. You don't need to go to that extent. So it's more like that, because it's a sort of kind of contract with the reader. It's like if we think they'll be too put off by something, and it's not justified in the text, then it shouldn't be there, I guess. Yeah, but yeah, every person's tolerance level is different. Yeah. So I don't think any publisher worries so much about going to jail or that kind of thing. Ban for certain topics, like if you anything to do with Shia, then people kind of know to stay away from it. Even though that's something that should be challenged as well, because it goes against freedom of religion, right? But people just automatically, okay, that one you stay away from it. Yeah. Even Cekik, should I share this? There was one part in Cekik I told Ridwan to cut. Kan? I don't remember, 2011. I said, ada. I said, yang part dalam masjid tu boleh potong kan satu ayat ni. Macam, so even that, I cut out one sentence, right? Satu ayat je kan. And then, but obviously that's not good enough lah. They still didn't like it, yeah.
Hi, Amir. Are there more banned books from local publishers than there are international publishers? And do you think banned books sell better?
Obviously, in the Malay section, is almost all local, except for some stray Indonesian things that get in there, but it's almost all local. Chinese, from what I could tell from this list that I showed to my friend, it says these are all Hong Kong publications. That some of them may actually be like pirated. So there would be a printer, a local printer, but it's not like licensed. Like there used to be a lot of like pirated manga. I mean, it is really printed here, really published here with an office and all that, but not with the right license. So Chinese ones tend to be mainly imported. English ones as well, mainly imported. Yeah. So, but when you look at the ratio and all that, I think more because Malay is just one of the languages. So I think majority, slightly over half, would be the imported ones. Yeah.
And the banned books sell better?
For just weeks, because because we continue selling the ebook. And for 2 weeks after that, there will be a spike. People are curious, but not for a long time. Yeah. Maybe that's like Lady Chatterley's lover kind of days, right? That kind of thing. Yeah. For example, all 50 Shades of Grey books are banned. So I think, many of you have, maybe you won't admit it, but so that should be a good test case. You provoke, you tag KDN and say, come and get me, motherfucker, that kind of thing. But will you be willing to go to jail for 50 Shades of Grey? Then that becomes that issue, right? Yeah, imagine telling that to your fellow prisoners, right? It's like, you'd be too embarrassed. So things like that.
Seeing that the bulk of books banned in the 90s were related to Arqam, and
not the bulk, but a big part, which was not present in other decades. So that was the anomalous thing, yeah.
And also how bans can also be subjective. What do you think about the law? Essentially, there's good and bad, and should it be amended or abolished altogether?
Yeah, because the law, as you saw it just now, is phrased very vaguely, right? It's just and anything, and then it says that might. So it's very wide open. So of course it's very open to abuse. But of course each government will say we won't. We already know. So I think if there's more pushback, then that would be something. But not many writers are as hardworking as Fazal Tehrani, to go to court. And the process took a few years, I think, right? More than 1 year. So not many people would go to that extent. So unless people do, then I think they will take it as this is a law they can just apply anytime. Yeah. So it's there. And no government has shown any inclination to abolish it or to tighten it. Yeah.
Hi, I'm just curious, since you were active in the 1990s as well.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I'm like Siti Nurhaliza, thank you. Yeah.
When all these books were banned and there were an increase in the number of books banned, did you see any visible deterrent or chilling effect among the writers community, the writers around you, or was it more like business as usual?
Oh, none at all. Because when I was looking through the titles, because it's 717 of them, most of them I'd never heard of. And it's like, what are these? It's like and they had no popular impact at all. So even the ones I knew, like Harold Robbins, I had read that. I had read the Harold Robbins Storyteller, but I think it was maybe before it was banned. So it didn't impact me in that way. And I think among the believers, I don't think I have it, but I knew of the book, but it's not something that impacted. Because I think Malaysia, we tend to make do, because I'm sure most of these 717 books at that time, if people really wanted it, you can get it, right? It's like gudang garam, kan? It's like it's gudang garam. Technically, you cannot sell it in Malaysia, but I think most smokers know how to get. Same thing with these banned publications, yeah. Because there's that cheesy quote. Who said it? There are worse things than banning books, and that is not reading them. Okay. So yeah, so I think among those who want to read, you know how to get hold of them. Same thing with movies, because since the days of pirated VHS, you can always get the uncut versions of things that you had to watch the cut version in cinema. So I think that has made Malaysians very non-confrontational because we find ways to get around it. Yeah. So it's not like a big deal to us. It's not like we feel we're that oppressed. And I don't think it affected writers in any way, because writers, if they want to be popular, then they know what kind of trend, what kind of style to follow. So I think that's more of a concern. So there'll be very few writers like Qasim Ahmad, for example, who believed in things and who had that conviction and that talent. And I think his life was affected, definitely. So if I think about banning books, Qasim Ahmad is a person whose life was affected. Another one, which is a different topic, there was a movie in the early 90s it was initially called Fantasia, and it was banned for a few years. And they had to keep going back and forth to try and appeal and all that. And by the time it was finally passed, the producer had died because it took such a toll on him, right? And he was very upset by it. So I think, yeah, in his case, definitely banning that movie definitely affected him. And in Qasim Ahmad's case, to a certain extent, Faizal Tehrani as well, because if you look at any article in which Faizal Tehrani is quoted, and it's shared on social media, you already know what kind of comments you will get. And these are people who haven't read anything by him, but they just know of him by reputation as somebody who is banned for, accused of being, Shia and that kind of thing. So it's that. So yeah, to these people, it did affect. But to most writers, I think no. For example, there was a banned novel called Cinta 100 Ela by Raja Azmi. And she was so unaffected by it, she made a movie of the sequel. So Cinta 200 Ela, that kind of thing. So I think there are some people who know how to capitalize on it. First time using this. Yes.
Just to check one thing,
Yes.
because in the 80s...
None of your books are banned, yeah, I know, because I published them, yeah.
Okay. So in the 80s and 90s, there was a series of children's encyclopedia, right? It's like a lot of them, a lot of volumes. And I've always been told there was one particular volume that we had that was actually banned. And I just want to know whether it is, because it's this series called Childcraft. And Childcraft, have you heard of it?
No.
Okay.
Like Minecraft? No.
Not exactly Minecraft. But one of them had an illustration depicting Malaysians, and it says, in Malaysia, the people live in trees.
Oh, okay.
So was that actually banned is my question.
Probably. Because one of the books banned recently was when I was a child, was it the Boi Chiming? And because it was allowed to sell, is that what it's called, when I was a child? When I was a kid, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So one of the books, it was allowed to sell for a long time. And then one page in it became viral in Indonesia because there was a flashback, not a flashback, but the whole book is a flashback, but where his father sees his maid climbing a coconut tree, right? And the father's comment to him was, "Oh, like a monkey," like that. So some Indonesians were very upset at that. There were protests there because saying that likening her to a monkey. And the Malaysian government banned it. Yeah, but the Indonesian government didn't, I think. So that's one case where it was just that literally just one panel, and then the whole book was banned. Yeah, so there are a lot like that, like a lot of non-fiction books about religion, for example, like there will be one image like, oh, this is Prophet Muhammad, that kind of thing. Because of course there were paintings of him in later years, but you're not allowed to print them in Malaysia. So because of that one thing, tak ada. So even Faizal Terani's books, some of them is the basic offense is like, oh, there's one hadith there that it's authentic only in the Shiite tradition. It's Sunni don't recommend that. They don't recognize that hadith. So something like that. It's just like one line. But yeah, but they will never say it. They will only when it's taken to court, or when in the Boy case, because of that particular protest, then we know, oh, it must be because of that. But most of it, we actually never know.
Since we're talking about purely Malaysian context, what about Singapore? I think they do ban more than us.
Singapore is quite smart because there have been a few Singapore films recently. There was one called Look at Me, which is about a gay pastor. And then there's another one this year. What's this guy? I know the director. It's about like an interrogation, political interrogation. It was in Rotterdam, that film. Singapore is quite smart. They don't say they ban it. They say we don't issue a certificate. Yeah. So technically it's not banned. It's just like, oh, but you can't show it. Why can't you show it? Oh, got no certificate. Why aren't you giving a certificate? Then go that way. So technically, so they know that language of Nela. And same with books. They don't classify it. But it's more for, I'm more familiar with the film thing.
Just to share with you, I recently met up with Lawrence Wong. There's his old podcast, Ipoh Mali Meorang. So basically he told me one thing. This administration will be more proactive.
This one?
No. He's talking about
Singapore.
Singapore. So he's actually formulated a new, I don't say a breath of fresh air. You can see. That's why now we're moving a lot of movie production to Singapore. Why? Because Singapore now wants to be a new Singapore, open. That's according to him. I don't know. So far, I haven't seen anything, but we're receiving a lot of support from Singapore now, and almost nothing from financial. Zero.
Yeah, I remember talking about New Singapore. There was a magazine called Big O, and they stopped publishing because there was one issue. You remember the Absolute vodka ad? How it looks. I mean, there will be a shape, and it says Absolute something, right? It's never vodka. It's Absolute something. So they had a shape of a toilet, the jamban cangkung. So it's a hole in the ground. And the caption was Absolute New Water. So after that, Big O did not publish. But I don't think it was technically banned, but maybe like permits were not given, that kind of thing, yeah. But I think Singapore, a lot of the loosening up has the appeal is like it will help the economy. I mean, it's like Pink Dot. Pink Dot is like saying that, oh, you have all these, you can attract all these gay expats to come to Singapore if you loosen certain laws. So it kind of goes back to that.
The concerts they're doing now, they actually pay for it, and they found the economic effects even better.
Yeah.
So for your information, Malaysia, zero tax on concert. Trying to copy cannot. Still Singapore take
it. Yes.
I mean, the conversation we had earlier revolved mostly around the Printing Presses Publications Act, but it's also mentioned about Citizen Act as well.
That was before that.
The pre-colonial law that still exists today. So perhaps maybe only the British would know to define what is citizen. So right now we're seeing in any administration is being used to censor any issue that is deemed 3R, right? The race, religion, and royalty.
So you can't even say it.
It's suddenly just blank. So do you think from a publishing perspective, or even as a reader, when G as a preacher was also jailed for 8 months because of that. So he had published, but obviously not in the traditional publishing.
It's a Facebook post.
So as a publisher yourself, also as a writer, how do you reconcile or work around this law that still exists?
I think it's very selective. What if they are because, for example, like certain times they are more strict. Like there was this good documentary recently called Sotong about the raid on the trans party in Rex KL. And one of the organizers was asked, why was this party raided, right? Because they've had drag queen events before. Why was this raided? And his answer was, because election. Yeah. So even that Swatch thing, if you remember, it was just after election or just before election. So whenever there are times when they feel they need to prove certain things, they will make use of the laws. Yeah. But that's quite banal. That's quite obvious if you see the pattern of things. So you just do. If you are a writer, you write. Yeah.
So on that note, that will make the conversation about these three art topics more challenging because you don't know what is sedition or is not sedition.
Yeah. Right? Well, sedition is always what they say it is. So, but I remember Wanji's Facebook post. And even I remember reading that and saying, like, agak-agak lah, like why would you write that? Yeah. So yeah, maybe that's a self-censor in me, but when I saw that, I thought, I'm not going to repeat it. Ada ya?
Would it be right to say that there's an inordinate emphasis or hysteria, if you like, over publications in Malay rather than those in English? Maybe the closing of the Malay mind. Thank you.
Because one of the books banned was this thing called, what was it? Syed Akbar Ali, the Club of Doom, which I thought was actually quite good, but it's very provocative. But it's in English. But it's sort of, I think it's less to do with the language, but the topic. Because, for example, if you write about like Islam in Malaysia, then they will pay special attention to it. So even if it's in English. It just so happens that most of the people who write about Islam in Malaysia will write about it in Malay. So that's the thing. So only those topics lah, if it's like porn, if it's, and the certain translations of the Quran are banned, like Yusuf Ali's, which were allowed to be sold for decades. And then suddenly, I think 5 years ago, they decided that Yusuf Ali's translation is banned. And they never say why. So you wonder, what was it that was thing. So it's things that could have been published a long time ago, but still there. But yeah, I don't think it's language per se. Yeah. But topic.
Did you ever read any of the banned Arqam books?
Funnily enough, because it's not something you want to read fully, but you flip through because I always associate Arqam with a place where you buy chili sauce, because that's they used to have these sort of family day events in Sungai Pechala, and you go and then you buy chili sauce, and I knew women in particular who very much trusted their taxi service. They have a taxi service because they said that they don't feel like the guy will make a pass at them because maybe. So they felt safe, that kind of thing. So we mentioned Arqam, I think, chili sauce. And I used to subscribe to their children's magazine. And there's a pen pal thing at the end. But you're not allowed to write to opposite genders. It didn't concern me. So I didn't write to any pen pal anyway. But because it's like Kuntum, but their version. Yeah, so I had, Arqam stuff around the house, just thinking that these are, kind of these eccentric people, that kind of thing. So the first book I actually read fully by them, because I found the subject quite fascinating, was by his wife, and it was called Manis Nyamadu. And it's saying that, isn't polygamy great? It's like, you should be jealous that, I'm in a polygamous marriage. So I just thought that perspective was just so new to me. I'd never heard it articulated in a whole book. So that's why I read it, based on that. It's like, like that. Yeah. And I remember the magazine, they would have, there was one where they showed the editorial board, and it's all female, and they all wearing purdah, but they all had captions. This is Ustazah ni. So it's like, I wondered, even back then as a primary school, it's like, how can they tell the difference? Like, yeah, like that. So I never thought of them as like, and this is a trivia note that people don't know. Hantu Komkom was a ghost invented by UMNO-owned media to make you scared of Arqam. So it started in places like Utusan Malaysia. I remember there was a front page Utusan Malaysia, but the lower half, and it was a drawing of a woman in a Buddha, and it's about Hantu Komkom. So it was a creature invented to feed into a kind of a negative stereotype. So nobody talked about Hantu Komkom before the 1980s, I can assure you, because it was very much an invented phenomena. Same thing with Orang Minyak. People think Orang Minyak is some long ago kind of ghost. No, it was invented by movie executives in the 1950s. So I think that's maybe, ironically enough, that is a legacy, one of the legacies of Arqam. We have this new ghost called Hantu Komkom. Yeah. Yeah. Those of you who don't know, Hantu Komkom is she drives a particular kind of car. I can't remember what. You know, it's like a red something. Like it's always said that. So she will go to your house and she will say, Assalamualaikum, Komkom, gala. Yeah. Yeah.
AMIR, I remember you wrote a tribute for our poet laureate, Usman Awam.
Oh.
Yeah, I think it was heavily edited, isn't it? And then we got to see the original version.
Oh my gosh, you go back, way back.
In another publication.
Yeah.
You want to share some?
Oh, okay. It's no big deal. I wrote his obituary, actually, come to think of it. And it wasn't for NST, it was for Star, for some reason. And they took out any references to socialism and socialists, that kind of thing. I just took out. And then the final version is published in Aliran. Yeah, just a few sentences. Said no space. Okay, no space. Yeah. Yeah, I forgot about it.
Is there any LGBT books banned before?
Yeah, because the book of ours that was banned, Aku, it's definitely because of LGBT content, but they didn't say it, they just say moral values. And it's about a gay couple in their 40s. And if you go to Goodreads and you read the reviews, a lot of people were kind of appalled that people in their 40s could be gay. Because, and literally verbatim, if you search the reviews, it's like, kalau BL tak apalah. Ni orang tua kot. So they were like, ew, so they were sort of challenged by that notion. They couldn't get over it. But yeah, we already run out. But yeah, definitely there would be quite a few. If you look at the list of some are just non-fictional things. Homosexuality in Islam, that's a well-known sort of academic book. Things like that. Yeah. But because like most book distributors, they know better than to bring in those books anyway. So why bother bringing in container loads of books and then to have them check and then confiscate and they don't give back? So you lost money. So a lot of these titles are already pre-selected by the time they come here. I don't know if Heartstopper was banned, but because there are some people trying to get it banned. This BL series that started off as a book. Isma was trying to get it banned. Yeah. Final maybe. Oh yes. Or more. Are there more questions? I think there are more questions than before.
Hi, my name is Dini. So just probably a final question. So since banning books is obviously like the power is within the government. So if in any situation, and I believe the next election will be like what, 2 years for us, I guess, and the current situation at America with the Trump Project 2025, they are trying to ban certain books, even like The Handmaid's Tale. So what if a new government was created and probably they elected you as the minister for KDN? Would you have how would you use your power, and what types of books that, in your view, should be banned or the ban should be lifted?
I think I can, if I go into the cabinet, I can foresee already people saying, and you thought Fahmi Fadil sucked. So I think we'll be in a very similar position. So I'm not even going to consider a universe where this is going to happen. I'm not in favor of bans. Like, maybe movies is easier to describe. I'm more in favor of like age restrictions. Like, if it's classified as 18 and above, you don't cut lah. Because if you're old enough to drive a car, or old enough to get married, old enough to own a weapon, or in Singapore, old enough to, national service and you train with rifles and all that, you should be old enough to see movies, that kind of thing. I suppose books, they will say things like, if it's a terrorism manual, how to build a bomb and all that, but I don't think you need books for that. You can go on YouTube and find out. And if it's something is libelous, then there's a civil action, then it's different. It's like, then that person will sue you. So it's like the government is not part of the equation. So I think there's hardly any justification, really. Okay. So okay. Wow, suddenly so popular. Whatever. Because a friend of mine named Daniel Aziz, he wrote a book called 50 Filem Melayu Yang Hilang. So I said, you should always write. I always tell him every time I see him. It's become a stale inside joke. He should write a sequel, 50 Filem Melayu Yang Sepatutnya Hilang. Okay. And don't stop at 50, please. Like, go on. So, I would ban things yang tu lah, yang di dekat, di jarak, but because it offends me to see things like that. But to be honest, I would leave it to the market. Anything should be out there, but anything should also be counted. Because, for example, like Qasim Ahmad's case, he was stating a case, and he was not, and this was pre-internet days, so you couldn't find it online. So, but people who were attacking him could be published, and they were given a lot of space, a lot of airtime. So people's impressions are shaped by that. So if you saw this list of books, he tried to even counter that, itu semua tak boleh. So it's no longer a level thing lah. But of course, easier said than done. Because if you remember the 90s political rhetoric, there was a lot of very explosive stuff being published about Mahathir, about UMNO and all that, but very few of them did. So I think it meant that things could still go ahead as normal. Compared to something like Singapore, those sort of things they will very much clamp down on local politics when it comes to books and documentaries. Like in Singapore, you can't even, I think the law still exists, you can't even make an interview about a documentary about an opposition politician, because there were people who were prosecuted for that, because you're not allowed to make political films. So political is defined as anything which gives airtime to opposition. Because and then somebody countered with, what if you make documentary on Lee Kuan Yew? And they say, oh, that's different, that's historical. So I think they clamp down much more on their political kind of scene, whereas I think we have other concerns. We're concerned about people's akidah and whether they're praying the right way, that kind of thing. And it also becomes a method of bullying. If you want someone to shut up, you will make sure their voice is not. But now in the internet age, that's become increasingly irrelevant. Okay, all right. Okay, thank you very much for everybody.